Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you could just use the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. These midday talks tend to attract people from all over the place, so I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Whidbey Island. That sounds lovely. I'd like to be on Whidbey Island today. It's so beautiful outside here. I'm in Seattle. All of our guests are in various parts of London. Berlin, hello, welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Laura Hamilton. I have a cookbook shop here in Seattle that's called Book Larder, and we do a lot of author talks and cooking classes in the kitchen in our shop in normal circumstances. And so lately we have been taking all that we do to Zoom, and it's presented all kinds of really lovely opportunities for us. And I think today really highlights what the upside of doing things virtually can be, in that we are hosting a couple of authors and interviewers who are actually in the UK. And when else would we be able to do something like that? So thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are. We are, of course, today here to celebrate the Towpath Recipes and Stories by Lori De Mori and Laura Jackson. Towpath is a restaurant in East London that I have had at the top of my list on my London trips forever. And really this summer was going to be the year that I went. And I was really hoping that my friends Olia Hercules and Joe Woodhouse, who are huge fans of the restaurant and go way back with it, would be able to join me there. But we'll have to do it next summer, hopefully, right? That we'll be able to do things like that. Olia and Joe are actually going to discuss the book with Lori and Laura, and we will leave some time for your questions. The book is available at our website, booklarder.com. Lori and Laura sent us book plates. I will show you. So you get the sort of best version of a signed copy that you will get when you order from us. And you can also support this talk and our shop when you place your order. We will leave time for some questions. Like I said, if you could just use that little Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen when you have questions. Like I said, we'll get to those in probably the last 10 minutes or so, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So I am going to ask Lori and Laura and Olia to tune in. Joe may be with baby, maybe not. We'll see.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Hi, Olia.
Hi, Lori and Laura. Good to have you here today. This is the first time I am the interviewer, actually, so bear with me. And I've just been trying to put a baby who's completely refusing to sleep tonight to sleep. But it's so wonderful to have you here. And I think we've kind of had the brief introduction. Lori is from America, and she's lived in Italy and has been living in the UK for a while. And they've been cooking together with Laura for the past 10 years. You've been working together?
Yep.
Yeah. And now you've written a book, and you've said before that you had to close the restaurant for a while, but all of that energy and positive vibes you've been able to put into your wonderful book, which I have here. And hallelujah, I am so excited. This is a book that I know right now it's looking quite new still, but I know that in about 10 years time, my oldest son, Sasha, when he's about 18 and he'll go to university, this is the book that I'm going to give him to take with him. Because to me, it's just, I don't know, comfort food is such a flimsy kind of phrase. It's not my favorite phrase at all, but looking through these recipes, just every recipe just jumps out at you, and you want to eat it and you want to cook it and you want to kind of use your hands and be with friends. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful book. And I know that, it's as I say, we've got 2 copies. So both Sasha and Wilfred can take it with them when they go to university. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the process about writing this book. So you've closed the restaurant for obvious reasons. And Laurie has written cookbooks before, but Laura hasn't. And it's interesting. Laura, can we start with Laura? So this was your first experience. And I know that you don't keep some chefs in restaurants, they have their kind of like little notebooks with all of the recipes. And whenever a new chef joins, they give them this little book and they're like, you must make this recipe like this. But I know that you don't have a little book, that all of these recipes are there and you're just kind of orally, if you have to explain it to someone, you just tell them kind of how to do it and show them, and then it kind of just flows. So was it a daunting kind of thing when you just sat down and you're like, oh, wow, I have to bring them all in my memory, sit down and write them down and test them? How was the process for you?
Well, the whole thing was really daunting, firstly, because, as you said, I've never written a book before, and not the most confident writer. So that was like the first kind of issue. And then the second thing is, so although I don't have sort of recipe books, I have hundreds of little notebooks everywhere which just have scribbles in them, which, sometimes if I'm looking for a recipe that I haven't made for years and I suddenly think, oh, I really want to make that. Like, for instance, because we're reopening tomorrow in December for the first time. And, we're out on the canal and you're exposed to the elements. So I'm very much wanting to cook food that is going to be warm and nourishing. So I was like, oh, I want to make my lamb tagine. And it took me about an hour to look through all my little books to find my scribbles for that recipe to remind myself. So, that was quite a long process. So I have lots of scribbles, but nothing with quantity. So it was quite hard also, and I'm sure you probably know this feeling, Olia, like when you've made something so many times and then you're asked to actually write it down so it's super accurate and that people can make it. It's quite a hard process. It's also, I became quite impatient because suddenly I'm like having to weigh the amount of garlic I'm putting in and how many onions, and I normally just do it by eye, and that's definitely kind of how I teach the lovely and incredible chefs who come in the kitchen to work with me. I'll show them a new dish and I'll be like, this amount of onions, but nothing's exact. So it was a long process.
There's a change in ingredients as well, and just so many factors that come in, and it's much easier to just be there and explain to someone in words, and and just say,
yeah,
oh, taste this, and maybe you need a little bit more sweetness, or you just can explain so much better, I think, when you're showing someone. So yeah, it's super hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. And it's also hard because obviously the recipes that we were writing in the book are things that I make all the time at Towpath. And I'm obviously when I'm making them at Towpath, I'm making it for sort of 40 portions, 50 portions at a time. And then suddenly I'm having to make it for 4. So that's like another obstacle. And I kept on like writing it and then making it. And I was like, because I was doing a lot of the testing with my parents in Australia, and my mom's like, this will feed like 20 people. Like you need to like make it much smaller, and that so it was but it was a really, really fun process because obviously things are different this year, but normally Laurie and I, we have we close from just after fireworks, so November to the beginning of March. And so it really was an amazing opportunity to use that time to really kind of thoroughly work on the book and write all the recipes and have the time to test it. So it was a really amazing time to do that.
And did you have like a really long, I don't know, a standard book has about 100 recipes. How many are there in Towpath roughly? Have you got just
Yeah, I think I think what's it, about 12 recipes a month? I think. I did too many, so I had to scrap about 20.
Yes, how do you do this? I always feel so heartbroken because a standard book is 100 recipes, and I, as a standard, I'd have about 150, and which is a good thing. You're like, it's better to have more than not so many. But then once you have to cull them, you feel, oh, I feel like a murderer. I feel so bad. How did you do it?
It was really hard, but I think the benefit with me is that I had Laurie by my side. So I remember saying to Laurie, can you go through all the recipes and can you pick the ones that you would want to get rid of and not say anything? And I'm going to go through the ones that I'd think that I'd be happy, not so happy to get rid of. And it was actually, I think we were like in total agreement. And I think
Well,
it was
like
down maybe.
it was like a little game where then I'd sit down and say, I think that, and it was also about like all of the recipes coming together to tell a whole story, so that you went through all the seasons and all the different processes. Like there should be pickling, and there should be jam making, and there should be rhubarb, and there should be peaches. But then, so it was like trying to get every facet in there made it that you would maybe take a recipe out that you totally loved, but that was somehow had been dealt with something similar. So that's how we would come. But then if we moved something, it was like chess. You're like, well, but now there's 2 rhubarbs in March. What, we can't have that. So I think it benefits so much from us, like being each other's sounding board. Even though we each, like everything we do in Towpath, we have such separate roles, but always with the eye on what the other's doing. And I just think you don't lose yourself in your own like dead end drive down the road when you have that other person who knows what you're trying to do and then can give you guidance. And
well, that's how you managed to have such a successful business for so long and also have this book. That's amazing.
I think, that really helped me as well with the writing process, because I could obviously, it was super daunting for me, but I could, just at the beginning, just when it was all sort of super new, I had Laurie to go to, who had written several books before and write so beautifully. So it was really like, it was comforting for me to.
But then I go back and look at like my first book and some of the recipes I wrote, and I was like, I can't believe I wrote that way. Like, you're always, it is like trying to explain how to walk. You feel like you want to say, like, just do this. And for Laura to have to say it in so many words and so many steps. But, even though it was daunting, it's like you always set the bar so high for yourself that if I didn't know you and I heard you say it was daunting, I would think, oh, poor thing, she's a great cook. But then there she was trying to write these recipes. But it's like your standards that you hold yourself to are so high that once you decided to do it, it was like, right, how am I going to transform these recipes that I've made a million times, and that exactly what you want to taste like and look like, and that you've had so much feedback from people, and reduce it to something that a family or a person living alone would want to make and be able to make. And
it's so hard. And the other bit of the book, which I love so much, are the stories, of course. And Laurie, was that a collaborative kind of, was it a fun process? Did you come together and kind of just brainstorm or go through old phone photos, or are there already kind of like, you just knew what you had to write about? Because there's so many beautiful bits.
I think I had more like notebooks where I would then remember something or think of something I wanted to talk about, and what would be a good illustration for how to explain like certain phenomenon that happened at Towpath, like the phenomenon of strangers meeting each other. and becoming friends, just because the nature of Towpath being, you know, not four walls and a room that people walk into, but a place where they show up. Like, I always think of like kids at the playground, the way you just turn up thinking, who's there? What can we do? Let's have fun. And, you know, once you see the same person 3 times, you're like, who are you? Or you hear, it just happens. You know, when you stand behind the bar, it's like, I've just got this spectacle of human nature just playing out, which luckily for me, I find endlessly fascinating. And so then you think, well, what's an example that I can tell that would actually be a great example for this phenomenon that I've seen play out a million times? And so, but then it was almost like in my mind, the book was almost done, or I thought it was done. And then I would, you know, have breakfast with a friend and they'd go like, well, I hope you're going to write about the music. And I think, oh my God, I didn't write about music and flowers, like the most important thing to me. So there's still, I kept thinking of new things, and some would turn out to be really long stories and some would just be like funny little vignettes that actually, again, it was almost the same as Laura with the recipes, and just thinking, you just want to touch on all these different elements that in some way, you know, they're very particular to Towpath, but they're also universal to human nature. You know, and one of the things I think so much with the year that we're all going through is that we've had time to figure out what it is we really miss, and just like simple connection and delicious seasonal food that tastes like the right thing for the time, and all of that kind of simplicity. It was fun to write about that, hoping that, you know, someone who lives in Seattle or in Berlin or wherever, they'll know that feeling, even if they haven't been to Towpath, but you know, they have it where they live.
Have you seen any romantic relationships spark up? And
oh, have we ever? And sometimes, well, we have like, it happened the last episode of us being open, where we have 2 customers who come the whole time, and then they ended up sitting like distant at a table and then really talking to each other. And we were all going like, why didn't we think of that before? Those guys would be great for each other.
But one of the girls who helped out one summer, washing dishes and running food, she got courted by a customer, and I think he came several times and then eventually gave her his phone number to her. And we found out, I don't know, Laura, you might not have found out, but we found out a few weeks ago that they're getting engaged.
Who?
Kate.
Oh my God, the guy who had the boat and the yacht?
Yeah. So that's
amazing.
Hooking up with the customer.
I love that. That's wonderful. Do you feel like it's changed a lot this year? I mean, I have actually been to Towpath this year, and because it's outside, it just felt normal. Actually, it was probably the only meal this year where I sat down with a friend of mine, and my baby son was in the pram just next to us, and that was the first meal this year where I just felt like it was kind of normal and nice. And I don't know, there was just this, you know, there's always like, recently I just find myself like looking at things or seeing signs or whatever, and just like, oh my God, yeah, we're in this really like strange times. But it didn't.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, we're wearing masks all day, the front of house, and that took a minute to get used to. But on the other hand, it's like everyone coming with their willingness to be out in the cold. I mean, it's the whole reason that we're doing this in December. And to, you know, it sort of feels like maybe we can be little creators of simple joy in this moment that is so crazy, because weirdly, where normally we would tell people like, you know, the list of places to go when we're closed, because it's like, go inside and be warm and cozy, you don't need to be coming to us. And now we're like, bundle up and come, and we'll sit outside and we'll drink wine and we'll eat really warming food. And, you know, but even that's going to be a total experiment, because who knows how, because as much as we might love the idea sitting in our warm house of like, yeah, I'll go to Towpath in December and sit outside and have a meal, you don't really know until you're sitting out there. And either it's going to create this like magical experience that 10 years from now you go, remember in 2020 and we sat out there and it was freezing, but we had so much fun. Because, you know, little things bring a lot of joy now. So it's like you're saying, the right thing a little bit goes a very long way at this moment.
So much. Is there going to be are there going to be kind of new dishes, because you haven't done anything in December for so long, and maybe there are some ingredients, Laura, that are in December that you've been always like, oh, I really wish that I could do like this very seasonal ingredient or something, and it's the best in December. And have you thought of that? Have you got any new
Well,
things?
the most exciting bit, which Laurie is also probably more excited than me about it, but I am is we just got our new season olive oil. And the olive oil is actually Laurie's neighbor in Italy. It's their family who makes the olive oil, and it is just incredible. And we got the delivery last week. It's actually,
and it's still, because, you know, do you have any? It's so like emerald green and like catches in your throat, and it's right after it's pressed. And this is the Capizzano winery, and they make wine, but they also have loads, I mean, acres and acres of olive trees. And unusually they have their own press, because usually people with olives, they'll go to a community press. The press is going 24 hours a day. Everyone has their slot. And because they have their own press that is like the most, you know, tech, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the best you can have. The olives go straight from being picked to being pressed. So there's no oxidation, and you get like the oil's just the best that it could be. And it's still that like really thick, bright green, peppery. And what they do in Tuscany at that time of year is just like look for dishes that you can put the olive oil on. And that's what we're going to be doing. And we had normally, you know, we've had some for ourselves, but we've never been able to give it to people who come to Towpath because we're already closed. And by the time we open in March, it's mellowed, even though it's still delicious. It doesn't have that like quality that it just has for a very short time.
And how big a batch did you get? How many liters have you got?
We were
consistent.
Well, we started saying like maybe we shouldn't get any. It's very, because it's always expensive, you know, and then we're having it shipped and you want it to arrive right away. And they were like, okay, last time we got 50, I don't know, 150. I can't remember if it's the tins.
Yeah.
And then we decided we'd get less. And then Laura's texting me going, I think we should get more. And, you know, it's just so good. It really like is making life better right now.
So
yeah, I think I've had half a tin already, just in a week.
So you just mentioned dishes that would be really good, you know, to put the olive oil over. So my husband, Joe Woodhouse, who used to work at Towpath, and that's how I know of the place actually. I met Joe. I've never heard of Towpath before, even though it's an institution and like one of the best places to eat in London, but I never really was on my radar for some obscure reason. So Joe took me there, and he also cooks at home a lot. And he of course cooked with Laura as well. He used to chef at Towpath, and his use of olive oil is very liberal. I mean, whatever, you know, I make him a Georgian dish or something, or Ukrainian dish, and he's just like, and there's just like a pool of really beautiful, you know, olive oil on top, and I'm just like, ooh, at first, you know, I kind of clammed up. I was like, why did you put so much bloody olive oil on my harcho or something? And, you know, that's your fault, Laura. No, but I really like it. But it does, if you've got this beautiful nectar, essentially, why not just, you know, pour it over and add this almost like the way that Joe uses it also with the juices, whatever, whether it's beans or whatever, it just makes for this beautiful broth almost, which I'm obviously a huge fan of.
Well, and also, I mean, you're not even mentioning that Joe took the
Yeah, the
photos
photo.
for the book along with Scott, and that, I mean, he's so much a part of the DNA of Towpath in every way. And this time last year, it was, and you couldn't come because you were so heavily pregnant. We were in Italy taking pictures for the book with and having new season olive oil. So all the kind of November dishes we were cooking in Italy.
These Turkish eggs, for example, Laura, is that
Mhm.
olive oil I see?
Butter.
No, that's actually
Is that
butter.
butter?
Yeah. But it would be delicious with olive oil.
So what? Sorry, I've got another child just opposite me. It's bedtime, Sasha. I do apologize. I'm not going to crack this walnut for you. I'm sorry. I love you, but it's time to go to bed. Joe, I promise.
Sorry, Sasha.
Say hello. So December dishes, olive oil centric and warming.
Yes, well, so this week, so we're doing the set menu dinner. So this week we're celebrating the olive oil. So I'm doing, which
Tell
I'm
me.
super excited about. So we're gonna do, which probably isn't great for the coldness, but because the olive oil is so amazing and something that Laurie and I always, when we go to Italy, because we tend to go every year when Towpath closes to Italy, and just when the new season olive oil comes out, and Laurie and I sit every night having just like fennel and Chickpea onions and radishes and celery just dipped into the oil, because you don't really want to mess with the oil that much. It's just, so everyone's going to get that to start with, but we'll swiftly be given some bruschetta with white beans and cavolo nero and just a really simple garlic and olive oil, so you can just really taste it. And then I'm gonna do a chickpea soup for the starter, like a super smooth one, and then will just be lots of olive oil drizzled on the top. And then I'm gonna do the meatloaf, which is actually in October, I think, of the recipe book, but it's a very kind of wintry autumnal dish. So I'm going to do that with smashed potatoes and loads more olive oil. And then a green salad, and then we're going to finish off with the olive oil cake. But
Yes, I was waiting for that. So,
but just to make it a bit more special, we'll put, because in the cookbook it's just simply the olive oil cake, but to make it, to zhuzh it up a bit, I'm going to do it with pine nuts on the top and this really beautiful sugar, the rapadura sugar that will be sprinkled over the top, just to give it a little bit of fanciness, although it's not fancy at all.
well, that's the thing. That's why I love eating at Towpath, and also why I'm so incredibly happy that there's now a book and all of these recipes, because ingredients do play a massive role, of course, but the recipes are kind of as simple as they're incredibly skillful. You know, reading through the recipes, and I'm a trained chef, and I cook professionally, and I cook as a mom, I cook in many capacities, but there are so many little things that I pick up on, and which, thank you, Laura, like, it's attention to detail is there, and this is what you want to do. It might be something that you've heard of before, like your like the aubergine dish that you've got, but there are just little bits that it's just an amazing book to learn from. How do you guys come up with the dishes? Is it a joint kind of decision-making process again, or do you, Laura, kind of just go through the seasonal ingredients and then you just sit down and kind of discuss it? How does it come about? Or Laurie, do you have is it a 50-50 kind of situation?
It's totally not 50-50. It's totally Laura's domain, which, because we have conversations about everything and we always have and we always will, it isn't her domain in that I'm not invited. Like we've had conversations, we have loads of conversations, especially around the olive oil, about what this first menu would be. But I kind of, you do it, Laura, and it's always exactly what I want to be eating. And when we have the conversations, they're more like conversations you would have with a friend than conversations that she needs my approval or, or sometimes, and then she knows, when she makes something that I especially like, that's like a personal favorite thing that I love, like in summer, the little gem with deviled crab, and it can be like so busy and hot and lovely and chaotic out, and it's on the menu, and I think I won't get it because it's going to go, because it'll always be finished, and then someone will come and bring me like a little plate with one, and that's where the conversation is. Like, she knows what I love, and I know that really it's her kitchen. It really is her kitchen. It's our place and it's her kitchen. So,
and may I ask about dishes that you may have brought from your childhoods, perhaps? I've already cooked Laura's mom's Marbella chicken, which was so delicious, and it included quite a lot of olive oil, which I loved. But I would love to hear some of the dishes that, Lori, that you may...
So one that I think of that's funny is that, when we talk about, like, if we sometimes will have a wine on the wine list that somebody doesn't like because they don't like that type of wine, or, if it's like an orange wine that's a bit funky, that people who love it are just like, yes, this is the one. And I think I would never want to drink that. Laura never, ever, ever will eat porridge. It's just not a thing. And of course, porridge has been on the menu every single day that Towpath has been open, because it was a perfect thing when we were cooking from home, and because it was a thing that I grew up eating. And the Scottish pinhead oats that are, so that they're nutty and they take ages to cook. And as a child, we always had like little dabs of butter and then brown sugar, and the brown sugar would make little kind of clumps, and walnuts. And Laura makes that. And then people do, the porridge loving people, like the orange wine loving people, totally love it. And there's that picture, it's one of the first pictures in the book, and I look at it and think, that is the most delicious thing. I love it. So
Laura,
it's way at the beginning. It's probably like the fourth.
I think it's the first
Laura,
breakfast recipe.
what's your beef with porridge? Why don't you? There it is. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, I love that.
It's beautiful. I must say, I love porridge. I love the idea of it. But you know how people say, oh, it's very slow and you're satisfied for ages. Not for me. Within an hour, I'm ravenous. It does like the opposite.
That's my issue.
Right?
It's because it makes me hungrier.
Thank you.
I was just about to say that. And so it's not,
it's so frustrating.
especially when I'm in the kitchen, I eat breakfast and then I don't really eat lunch because we're obviously doing service. So the porridge thing just makes me so excruciatingly ravenous that I need something else. So, and I'm definitely more of a, I know it's kind of savory, but you do like the great thing about the porridge is, it is getting like the honey or the kind of sweetness. And I'm definitely a savory. When I'm having a substantial breakfast, I want it to be savory. So that's why I tend not to go for porridge.
Guess what my mom has porridge with? Crumbled feta and very good olive oil drizzled over it.
Oh, interesting.
It works. It works. It's good.
Okay. And is it oatmeal? Is that the grain?
Yeah. Oat porridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a Ukrainian thing. She just kind of, she wanted porridge, but she didn't want to have anything sweet, so she just was like, oh, well, I'll put a little bit of salty. I have some really good olive oil, drizzle it over. I love it. I've tried it. It's really good. So Laura, but yeah, that's not, but honestly, porridge is, yeah, it's not satisfying, but it's very beautiful in the book.
But it's satisfying for the sort of comfort
Yes.
feeling that it gives you.
Absolutely, but it doesn't. If you're a chef and out working outside all day long, especially, or a mother, a feeding mother, no, not good.
No.
What other dishes are there from kind of, I don't know, that you've been cooking or been cooked for years and years and years and years, that have made it into Towpath and maybe have some really, really personal kind of heartwarming and universally kind of close to heart stories?
Laurie, do you
Well,
want to go first?
One, I'm not like a massive meat eater, but I can tell when I do eat meat how much my body enjoys it. And in Tuscany, we live quite near where they make all the really, really beautiful, huge terracotta pots, including the ones that they used to store like wine and olive oil in way back. And they still, the traditional ones, they still throw all the pots, or they're actually building the pots, and then it takes like a month, and then they build the most enormous fire and put the pots in to bake them. And in the whole Tuscan way, where nothing should go to waste, not even the heat from the cooling embers of this fire, there's a traditional dish that is made that's called peposo. And it's like real stewing meat, not like a super expensive cut of meat, red wine, and loads of pepper. And then it just cooks for a long, long time. There it is. And that's a dish that I love because it's so warming and delicious. And also, in the tradition that they'd make it, the person who had the kiln that did the big fire, so it would be like once a month, this like huge, would just invite like 50 people over for dinner. And that kind of generosity and simplicity is why I love that dish so much. I mean, it just evokes so many of the things that I care about in one dish.
I love it. I love this so much. Laura,
One.
you know what you're, so I'm writing something, I'm working on the project, and it's, you know, normally I travel around Ukraine or whatever, I go to places and I collect other people's stories. Well, Mamushka was quite personal, I suppose, but this project is really, really personal. And when I was reading your mom's chicken marbella recipe, it kind of brought up quite a lot of stuff, actually. So as you were mentioning, Laurie, there are so many things that are universal and kind of make you connect to people that come to your cafe, but also that even know you. You know, I know you and I read the book. So Laura, the chicken marbella, that came from a cookbook, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know what it made me think of? It just made me think of maybe something similar. So in the 1990s, you know, we had some cookbooks. We had like Soviet cookbooks or like really old Ukrainian cookbooks at home with like really horrendous photographs. There's one with like this sausage that really looks like something you don't want. Oh, you know, really interesting ones. But in the 1990s, our family friend, Uncle Vadik, bought the first kind of foreign translated cookbook. So it was a Canadian chef, Ron Kalanyuk, and it was translated from English into Russian, and it was like cuisine from around the world. And it was split into different continents, and then each continent was split into a different country. And my mom still, you know, she still has this book, and there's just loads of kind of, you know, loads of marks that she's made in the book, and she's been cooking so many dishes over the years, and I haven't, you know, I've never really considered those dishes as, you know, something to write about. I just thought, oh, well, we've got our family, you know, something that my grandma cooked or whatever. But actually, I just thought, oh, she used to make this, she still makes this incredible rabbit from this, you know, Canadian chef's book, because it was such a novelty, that book with all of these pictures. You know, now I look at it and it's 1990s, you know, it already looks a little bit dated and whatever, and there's so many props and weird kind of like lobster claws everywhere and whatever. But it was amazing, and it was such an exciting book to delve into. What, your mom was a great cook. What was your kind of, did she have one book that she really relied on, or was there loads, or where did Chicken Marbella come from?
So I think probably the difference between my mom and your mom was my mom really wasn't an adventurous cook at all. And you know, we would always sit down at the table, and I always, you know, we would have meals together as a family most nights of the week. But it was, she really, like, I mean, you know, obviously in the book I write how it's such a huge inspiration, and the whole kind of, the kind of ritual of eating together and the love for food was there. But she really, I would say I could count on my hands maybe like 10 dishes that she did that she would just repeat. And there were like a few that were sort of, would be for, you know, when they were having dinner parties and friends rounds. And then there were the just kind of the spaghetti bolognese and the tomato sauce and the roast chicken, sort of the simple but still delicious things during the week. So chicken marbella was definitely one of those. It was the kind of show off dinner party dish. And it was from, now, God, Laurie, you know, I've just had a total mental block. So it was an American cookbook. It was it the Silver Palette?
Definitely could be.
Yes, sorry, I don't know why, because I've got the book and I've just had a kind of mental block, and I'm sure you guys from the States
Not Joy
know
of
the book.
Cooking. Not
the Joy of Cooking. It's the Silver Palette by like
Palette.
somebody Rosso and no, I think it's in, I don't have it here, but yeah, it's like one of those institutional Bible, like the Joy of Cooking thing, but it was a smaller book, and there were like quite a few different ones, but it was yes, thank you, the Silver Palette Cookbook.
Thank you.
And it actually doesn't have any, it's more kind of has sort of illustrations rather than lots of photos in there. But my mom definitely cooked, like, another one of the dishes, which I'm pretty sure was from that book, was, which sounds disgusting, and actually I keep on pestering her for the recipe, is this tuna lasagna that she would make on special occasions, which sounds disgusting, but it's actually really delicious. And actually I'm going to hassle her for that recipe. But yeah, there were certain things. So it was quite like easy cooking, easy to find ingredients. You know, that was kind of her thing. So.
Well, it's amazing. I cooked it. I love it so much. Laurie, what was your upbringing like? Who cooked in your family? And
well, it was very, I mean, Laura and I laugh sometimes about how we just have this natural chemistry. And so when you were talking about like the 10 dishes, I mean, because we have these similarities. And when you're saying, you know, your mom had the 10 things she made, it's like, that was my house. 4 kids. We always sat down to dinner together. You know, all 6 of us, we drink like big glasses of milk. I didn't, but the boys always did. And, you know, there was definitely like a sense of family at the table that really felt good, and it really was like a thing that we always did. But she had, you know, 10 things that she made, and it was like spaghetti bolognese, a chop suey, this kind of tortilla chip casserole that we really loved, that I can just taste what it could taste like now. And but my kid's dad has had restaurants for, like, this food element entered into my family when I was from like around when I was 19. And my brother-in-law opened a bakery, and my nephew went to school to train to be a chef. And there's just been a lot of food in the family, including then that informed like my own mom, who is now an incredible baker and makes. So we all are teaching each other now. But we had TV dinners and things too, which was like a huge treat to sit in front of the television with our TV tray and our thing that we chose. That was basically like having an airplane meal. And we were so excited with all the little compartments with everything in it.
Oh, I don't know. There's something.
I mean, and in that way, I suppose it's like, I don't know what it's like in the Ukraine, like what the food culture was like, and I would love to know. But in America, the food culture, it's almost like we've come to the appreciation the way you like find religion, like with this huge enthusiasm of, this is it. Not the way it was in Italy, where everyone just grows up with this incredible amount of knowledge that's passed down to them.
Right.
That wasn't my family. Definitely not.
And still, I think, as well as cooking amazing food or something that's been passed on to you, that whole act that you've described of kind of getting together around the table, which is kind of really feeds into Towpath and its ethos, is that, isn't it? Like, yes, you can have an occasional TV dinner and that's fine, and that feels kind of nice. And no to the airplane, is the thing I love that. The overall feeling that you, it seems, both grew up with was this sense of community, first within your family, and then you've kind of brought that to your restaurant. There's a question here. So at what age, I think at what age did you get the cooking bug, Laura? When you knew you were on the path you wanted to go down, have you ever strayed off that path? Thank you for that question, Rob.
Wait, sorry, what was the first bit of the question?
At what age did you get the cooking bug? And did you ever stray off, or once you got into cooking, you were like, I'm just gonna do this?
So it first happened, I went to do, I'd finished my undergrad, and I was then going to go back and study, but I had a year off between going back to uni, and I'd always been very, very interested in eating and food, but I wasn't very good at cooking at all. So I thought I'd go and do a cookery course just to kind of teach me some basics, so that when I went back to study, I'd be able to kind of maybe cook some remotely edible dishes. And I started doing that, which was only meant to be for a month, and I ended up loving it and ended up doing a 6-month cookery course.
Was there, sorry to interrupt, was there a moment, like any sudden moment where you just went like, during that short course, was there a thing where you just went, oh, wow, this is really doing it for me now? I don't know, was there something that you've cooked very well, or was there anyone?
I don't know if it was a specific thing, but I hadn't particularly been super enthusiastic about my undergraduate degree and learning and on that subject. And then when I started doing this course, I just loved every minute of being there and learning and cooking and the practical side and all of that, even though I was still quite terrible at it. But it was only meant to be a month long, and I think after 2 weeks I was like, oh my God, I'm just loving this so much. I want to do it for because you could do a 6-month course. So, but still, I'm not sure if at that point I was like, I'm going to do this forever. But then as I stayed on and continued to do the course, I was just like, oh, I really want to at least see where this goes. And then I did, and I haven't strayed since that day. It's been food 100% for me.
How long were you cooking for before you joined Towpath? Because you worked in France for a bit and in restaurants in London too. How many years?
So my first job was at a deli called Murray's and Morgan, which was for 2 years. And then I did 2 years at Rochelle Canteen. And then I went to France for 8 months. And that's where I met Laurie. And then came back. We met, Laurie was a guest at this. So I was cooking at this tiny little hotel, a little auberge, which had 8 bedrooms and a bar and a restaurant. And he's in this tiny, in Chassignon, which is a tiny village, if it's even called a village. There's nothing there, no shops, and there's about 50 people living there.
It's dreamy and it's still going. So if anyone wants to make a trip there, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely
yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's run by different people now, but it's still kind of, they've kept a similar sort of ethos and philosophy around it. So but it was, yeah, so Laurie came on holiday, I think twice or three times during the season.
Yeah.
And you obviously get to meet everyone who's staying there because you're in the middle of nowhere, and so everyone chats to everyone, and yeah, that's how we met and started talking.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Was Towpath in kind of already an embryo in your head, Laurie, or?
It definitely wasn't. For me, I mean, Towpath is definitely something that happened. It was not something that I ever thought, like, I think I'll go to London and I feel like opening a restaurant or it definitely was something where, for whatever reason, something comes into your life that you're interested in, and you're just finding that you're engaging. I mean, it's really been like this kind of like magical, mysterious thing, because when you look at Towpath, it really, it's very ephemeral, especially when we opened and had no kitchen. There's not much to it in terms of space, and we can't stay open all year. So it's always like, what can we do with this? And it's funny because 10 years later, here we are in winter going, so if we turn it, everything upside down, inside out, so now it's actually safe and better to be outside when it's cold, that kind of element of challenge, and also just of social experimentation and curiosity, like what would happen. And then when you put the people together that actually really get on together and have, like, Laura and I share so much, we share the same ethos entirely. So we're just always on the same page about everything. But it definitely wasn't planned. And we definitely have ended up not with what we would have ever been able to imagine all those years ago.
I'm just going to quickly.
Rob Small.
The Towpath story sounds all very organic. Are there any plans for Towpath West or North or South?
Definitely not. No way. I don't think you could duplicate it. But you could certainly duplicate the spirit. Someone else could somewhere else, and they should.
And this book is here to inspire, certainly. Can I just finish with one kind of a little bit of a prosaic question that maybe you can put poetry into? Do we have time for one more or no?
Oh yeah, you definitely do. I only chimed in because there was a question in the Q&A that is sort of along the lines of what we've been talking about, and then you can do your prosaic, Olia.
Yes.
Okay? Or Olia, geez. I'm talking with someone named Olia tomorrow, and so there we go. It's all in my head. And I think this is a great question because, we're all sort of traveling through our books right now. And I feel like yours really gives us this really strong sense of place. So they would like to know, how has life on the canal changed over the years since you opened? And what was the Towpath and Regent's Canal like when you first started out?
Laura?
You go.
It was a, first of all, the canal had been disused for ages. Where we are now, it wasn't even paved. So when we put our little tables out, if a bit of wind came up, it would just like deposit a whole layer of dust on top of everything. And our dear friend, Leslie Cotter, who actually lives in Seattle, I remember that she came that very first week. It was so freezing. She was at a conference. She dragged 10 people from her conference to come out into this, like, onto the canal, freezing cold, unpaved. Laura, you made like a shepherd's pie or something like.
Yeah.
And so there was really not much going on there. And a lot of people who were Londoners, like Laura's friend who owned the place in Chasseneuil, said, you're completely nuts to open a place there. And it has since become very, very busy and
Lots of
bustling.
disused buildings.
Oh, Joseph Woodhouse.
Hey.
This baby is not going to.
Sorry, we had this interview planned. He was going to be my sidekick and we were going to be really funny together. And then
No, Wilf just wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
sorry, Lori, you were saying about Towpath.
Well, so now, of course, the canal is like incredibly busy and there's other places on the canal. We were the only ones there for years. And what else, Laura?
Yeah, just it was lots of empty buildings that were all then demolished and turned into lots of tiny 1-bedroom apartments, and with the kind of lower ground as retail, has got other restaurants and things. And so yeah, it's totally gentrified and lots of people walking by now, and yeah, it's busy.
It's
And
bustling.
it was bustling, and it definitely wasn't when we first opened, and would sometimes feel a little bit unsafe if you were there on your own or even with just one other person.
I'm going to ask you my prosaic question now. I would love, so, if I give this book as a present, which I will, buy it as Christmas presents, people, please support your authors. I wanted to ask two dishes from you, one from Lori and one from Laura, that I can just make this, let's go seasonal, kind of autumn, winter. Make this dish to kind of really feel the vibe. I know it's a really hard and like rubbish one, I'm sorry. But if there's anything, any like a couple of dishes that you can recommend and describe. I'm so hungry.
Well, one thing that I would say to make, and it's all making me sound like I'm a sweet tooth, which I'm really not, but the olive oil cake, which is just this like homely, simple cake that has no frosting, no icing sugar on top. It's we've had it again since the very first day, and it has like just all those really wholesome ingredients of, and again, you want to use really good olive oil and orange juice and citrus zest and milk and really good eggs. And it's again that thing where when every ingredient that you're using is just those most delicious bright orange yolk eggs and really good olive oil. And because it doesn't have, it's like a breakfast cake or a little tea cake or something. And it's just, it has that like homely quality. And because it's a cake, it also means you're offering it to more people than just yourself. So that has that to it.
I know it looks really unassuming, but this is the one recipe that so many of my friends, once they found out that I have a connection to you guys through Joe, before the book came out, I just got pestered so much over messages like, Olia, the olive oil cake, it's incredible. I do. That's definitely one that I would also recommend. And Laura, one from you as well, please.
I mean, it's predictable, and Laurie's gonna know what I'm gonna say. But
would
it's
say-
what I always say, because it's kind of me in a nutshell. I would go for the roast chicken because I love roast chicken so much, but it is just so versatile. But I think for me, the thing I love the most about it, which is how I love to cook, is that you can get so many things from the roast chicken. So you can have the roast chicken for your meal, and then you'll likely have some meat left over to make either a salad or another dish or a pie. And then you have the carcass to make your broth. And then from that, you have a multitude of things you can do with the stock. You can, the dumpling soup or just vegetables, or you can use the stock to make any form of soup or stew. So I just think, that's the one for me.
I have a, can I add a savory one to mine?
Yes, you're allowed.
Which is also because it's not something I grew up eating or that I really, and I have to say, I've never made it because I only eat Laura's, but I love the fish pie. And it seems like it's a very British thing. And then I've had all these other fish pies after I had Laura's that have always been this enormous disappointment in, fancy fish restaurants in London. And the smoked haddock and the potato on top, and then, with the really crisp salad, just delicious, delicious thing.
So this is it for me, Towpath. All very simple sounding things. You've got your roast chicken, you've got your fish pie and another bowl cake. But I assure you, if you make it from the book, it will just be the best versions of those dishes that you will ever make. Thank you so much.
Well, Olia, thank you.
Olia, thank you so much.
Thank you, Olia and Lori and Laura. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. The book is, of course, available on our website. It's the holiday season. This is exactly the kind of book that when my husband was still able to give me cookbooks before I had a store, that I would have absolutely loved to get as a gift. Lose yourself in the stories and make lovely, lovely food. So thank you so much. Congratulations, Lori and Laura, on your very first cookbook. And I hope that your December opening goes well and that I will get to see you next summer.
Well, we hope that we'll get to see you. We hope that we'll get to see you in Seattle. We have beloved friends
And we
in
would
that
love
part
that.
of the world. So one day.
And thank you so much for inviting us to do this. And thank you, Olia. Fantastic.
Yes.
Totally fun. Thank you, everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Stay safe and healthy, everyone. And we'll see you later.
Likewise.
Thank you. Bye.